Welcome in, everybody, to post-game coverage of the Browns' 27-10 defeat to the Los Angeles Chargers. The Browns dropped to 2-7, and they are, as of this evening, in a 7-way tie for the worst record in the NFL with 6 other teams. And I think based on those tiebreakers, they have the 5th or 6th pick. So that's the latest on the draft pick status, which unfortunately, Jake, as we kind of get this thing started, is where your mind starts to turn again. We had a 1-week reprieve based on a really stellar Jameis Winston performance, and I would say a whole team performance, the defense, offense, special teams, that you thought maybe there was a little bit of a glimmer of hope, a peek at something different. And this week was really back to what this season has felt like for the most part. And in some ways, I think you could make the argument the most disappointing loss of the year.
Yeah, I mean, considering what's at stake, right? That this was, leading into the bye week, we had talked about you had a chance to get to 3-6, get some guys healthier. It was a little bit of a gut punch to have JOK go to the IR as he did, but you can understand that based on severity of that situation. But the idea was to go into the bye week, get a little healthier, rested, rejuvenated, 3-6, potentially be a game out of the wild card race and in the old graphic in the hunt, as they say. But you wrote out a great way for them to get back into this. We talked about the Denver situation, 1-6 or 1-5 to 6-5 at one point last year. It was certainly doable. Everything was in front of them. They, as a team, spoke on that exact topic all week about how everything they wanted, despite this really rough start, was right where they could still attain a lot of those things and control their fate in a lot of ways. And it's tricky, man. You're right in one sense that this is the most disappointing loss considering the stakes and everything, but that's a pretty good football team. So it's not the most, I can't believe they lost type of game, but the way in which this one was non-competitive, I didn't see it coming. And I think there's been a few of those uppercuts that have caught us looking away and catching it on the chin this year. So that's a bit of the problem. But, when you're in the reality of the moment, it sure feels disappointing because this feels like the sort of thing that is your season's done. You lose any wiggle room period, and you obviously fall to 5 games under 500 before the bye. And you could have put a lot of people into a lot of financial trouble if you'd have taken bets on this at the beginning of the year, because it's just so wildly unexpected. And on top of all of that, Andrew, is like during the game, Pro Football Talk is basically telling us that a trade of Zadarius Smith is set to happen. It's like the second quarter of the game that tweet is coming out. It's very strange, but yeah, the point of what you said, the most disappointing loss of the year, probably because it's the most recent one. But I definitely do feel like we thought there could be some rejuvenation, some bounce back. Like there's a light here, maybe at the end of this tunnel, that we can see how this continues to get better, and they're competent. And you worked up a week's worth of this is how it could happen, and this is why it could happen, and then that sort of clunker, man, is tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, I think we probably wanted that to be true. You're kind of trying to will it to be true because it means that what we're doing here, what people go through over the rest of the season with the team, feels different than it does if they're 2-7 and where they are now. And so you were just kind of hoping and trying to put that rosy picture together of what it would look like. But I think what was, when I say most disappointing, what was most disappointing to me about this one are the ways in which this looked like the football team that we maybe obviously naively thought was about what was going on with the quarterback situation, right?
Yeah.
Some of the mental error stuff, some of the offensive line issues, the inability to run the ball, just offensive wide, the passing game looking totally stagnant with not really a great idea of where to go with the ball, play to play, and not creating those open opportunities like they had been. And it just kind of felt like we were right back in the soup. And I still feel confident that it was a correct evaluation to say that Deshaun Watson was holding this offense back. But it's obvious that there are other issues, a significant number of other issues, and that puts the onus then on the coaching staff and the general manager, because you have questions about the quality of the players, you have questions about the quality of the scheme. And part of the hope of them being better and playing better was that we could put those conversations off for a little bit longer.
Right. Yeah. That's obviously the hope. And again, in retrospect, and I think I started to feel this way later in the week, that I even told you guys in in our Slack channel, like the Ravens are kind of in trouble. I mean, they played fine today and won today, and they put up a lot more points, but that defense is not very good, and they certainly play in a way that is meant to put guys in situations in the back half of their defense where if the front group isn't getting home and creating chaos, you're really likely to be in trouble. And what we probably didn't consider well enough was all of these teams who are pretty good tend to have those letdown games. Think this
Right.
is
I think that's the main thing we missed.
1-6 Browns team, not really amped up, not ready to go, and on that side of the football, it caught up with them, and it happens that way sometimes. Yep. And I'm not. And this is me and you. This is a lot of people. I think that nobody should be held like, haha, look at you, laugh at this.
No.
We're looking for slivers of hope in a beautiful season. And, having a week, almost like our bye week, feeling really good about things for a moment was a nice way to feel. Even if it was misguided, it still felt fun to believe again after 7 weeks of you just couldn't believe. And now, there is some water splashed in the face here, and you have to go back to thinking about things the way you were thinking about them: draft picks, players in the draft, trades to be. The trade deadline looms on the 5th. It'll be here before we know it. So I just think that is the part of this that stinks the most, is kind of coming back to reality and obviously dealing with the dreadful feeling of this offense is. And when again, this is a different structure, the way that the Colts play. And my initial feeling, Andrew, is when I watched it, the Colts knew what the Browns wanted to do. They had a great feel for what formations they like to run, certain concepts in the passing game. I mean, I'm watching that specific interception it was thrown to Cedric Tillman with anticipation on a dig, what's called dagger, which is a concept where you're pushing the number 2 receiver up the middle of the field in what's called a clear out route and then running a dig underneath it. And when the corner is playing you so far inside because he knows you're going to break in that you can't even break in because he doesn't care. He doesn't have any help behind him. So he's just playing on your inside shoulder, is not letting you do that route you want to run because he doesn't have any fear you're about to go vertical. Those are the things that tell you these guys had no problem understanding what the Browns are going to do. That 4th down swing pass to Nick Chubb where nobody was carrying with any of the verticals down the field. They just sat intermediate and broke up on the football and had 3 defenders like traffic cones just bottling Nick up, or he couldn't even move on 4th and 2 on a swing screen where he had a guy out in front of him. I'll watch it again. Didn't need to see how the Chargers play every route, but as far as a team I'm watching have a great feel for what the Browns wanted to do, it felt abundantly obvious to me that they had a good feel for it. So when you mix a team that Jesse Minter's doing a great job with, pattern match, zone concept stuff, and again, his name's going to keep coming up for jobs in the NFL, big-time jobs, and you mix in a Browns offense that is still like very elementary on some things, you have a chance to have the outcome that we saw today, which was it looked like the field was like 40 yards wide instead of 53 and some change. Like everything felt condensed and narrowed down, and that's a credit to the Chargers defense and the Browns not quite solving enough of what they do to put their guys in a better position. And Jameis played poorly. So that's also true.
No, I think that's a great way to wrap it up. And the Chargers do deserve a ton of credit. They've got some guys that you are not really household names, right, that are playing really well. And I think they deserve some credit for getting the most out of those guys. So, yeah, like you said, Jesse Minter is definitely going to be – he's the next Mike McDonald. He's it's the same career arc, right? DC at Michigan, comes to the league, puts on a clinic, and for year 1, year 2, he's going to be getting job offers. There's no doubt about it. So
kind of looks like him too, if you're being honest.
I mean, listen, it's – I want to know where Jim Harbaugh is finding these guys, right? Because it is not the easiest thing in the world to produce 2 back-to-back NFL defensive minds of that quality, that are that young and that apparently brilliant at what they do. It kind of beggars belief that he could have that kind of an eye for coaching talent, but certainly it's one of his skills. He's always, surrounded himself with really talented coaches. So, yeah, you do give the Chargers a lot of credit. I think the point that you made about how well prepared the Chargers were brings me to a point that this game felt similar to other games that we've seen over the Stefanski tenure, where you kind of see, even in the first quarter, early on, their offense just looks dead to rights. Like they are not finding things easy in any phase of the game, and that feeling, it doesn't happen often, right? And it just, in fairness to Kevin, equally as often they are, it's the opposite, and they're finding guys open all over the place, and they've got the defense figured out in the same way that it felt like the defense had them figured out today. But you do see this from time to time in the NFL where one team just has the other team's number. It was for a while, it was every time they played the Patriots, Bill Belichick knew exactly what was coming from Kevin's offense. And so there are teams that you're going to have less success against. That's part of the NFL. I think what the part that Jake, I was really surprised by was the ineffectiveness of the running game, because it felt like the way that the Chargers were playing them, there should have been opportunities there. So I think one of the things that I'm interested to see when we get into film review is how much of this is the offensive line, how much of this is what the Chargers were doing, how much of this is Nick Chubb maybe still not being back, even though we really want to say that he's back, and just kind of trying to figure out what exactly happened there, because it wasn't just that they had some success. They really just did not have success running the football.
Yeah, I believe there was a long of 11 yards for Nick, so not much. I mean, 15 for 39, 2.6 a carry. Pierre Strong and Jerome Ford carried 4 times for 13 yards. There was nothing to be had there. Now, like you said, we could get into this and look about holes being missed when they're trying to cut, whatever. There's a lot of different things that could be the case, but from the naked eye watching that, it felt very bottled up, and it felt like the Chargers won the point of attack. It also felt like they knew when to play downhill. Felt like they had a really good feel for play action and run action concepts. Bootleg stuff was covered pretty well. We're doing a little bit of guessing here because, again, kind of got to see it from the whole picture, and we'll update our opinion on this. But yeah, there's no doubt, and I think the telestrators and announcers of the game looked at this the same way it felt, which was there were times where the Browns had light boxes, 6 or fewer, that they created either from the gun or various spread under center concepts. And at the time that comment was made, which was, I believe, in the mid-third quarter, they were going for like under 2 yards a carry in those scenarios. That's an indication that you're getting your butt kicked. Now, again, we'll watch it. Did the scheme have no chance because of numbers? Did the defense call it out no ahead of time? There's some of that stuff that could happen. Again, we'll talk about. But as far as just like looking at the holistic picture, it was as bad a run game performance as I've ever seen from them, at least this year. And it's been some ugly ones. And they were trying. I mean, to run Nick 15 times, you're trying to do this stuff, and they couldn't solve it. They couldn't win at the point of attack, and that part is a really big bummer because, you know, if a team like the Chargers who wants to drop guys as often as they can, 7 in coverage, bring 4. They did get a little aggressive with some blitz in certain scenarios, but I, by and large, didn't think that they were overly aggressive. I just thought they won up front all day, and
Absolutely, yeah,
that led to some frustration from the play calling side. That why can't they? You could when you run that much of a volume in a game, you're down 20-3 by halftime. You are like, why can't we figure this out? It feels like this should work and it's not working, kind of thing. So that's where I'm really concerned, Andrew, because
yeah, for sure.
I also thought the pass protection was fine in this one, but I didn't feel good about any of the run game stuff. And when you have Joel and Wyatt and Posick and some of these guys and DeJuan playing tackle, you got to think Jack's a really well-regarded run blocker throughout his career. You got to think you can do this stuff. And when you can't, it's got to be so frustrating to call plays with this.
That was exactly where I was going with it. It's not that they didn't run it because they didn't try to run it. They were trying as much as they could, really, to keep in a series to run the ball, and you were giving away downs because you were getting a yard or two, and now you're behind the sticks. So it was, like you said, it was not that they didn't think that they could or didn't try to. It was that they didn't have success doing things that mathematically, when you look at the number of people they had in the run game, including tight ends, number of blockers on the field, and what they were able to get against lighter boxes from the Chargers. Like you said, they mentioned it on the broadcast, but it looked really apparent throughout the game. It felt like I wanted them to keep doing it because it felt like they were on the verge. And I think Nick hit that 11-yarder early in the third quarter. It was like, okay, can they run their way back into this? That feels a little crazy, but it was going to have to be that because they weren't able to throw the ball at all. And I think overall it was very frustrating, not just from the standpoint that they couldn't do it when they should have been able to do it, but it remains so inconsistent week to week. You don't know what you're going to get out of the run game. And typically for Kevin Stefanski in his offense, that has been the dependable piece. So you can talk about Bill Callahan being in Tennessee. You can talk about Alex Van Pelt being in New England. I don't know. You can talk about Drew Petzing running one of the better offenses in the league in Arizona right now, right? I mean, that's another name we got to mention here. The Browns just do not have the same offensive juice. And it's the sample size, Jake, is big now, right? I know that there were injury issues behind what happened last year, but they were a bad offense last year, and they're a bad offense this year. And you start to you simply have to ask structural questions about the way that this is all set up.
Yeah, if the sample size continues to grow and you're not overachieving, and Jameis has got some blind spots. There's no doubt about that. And Watson's got some blind spots, but to be this bad over this sample size, you got to ask the questions. It's beyond fair at this point. The team regressed in Mayfield's second year in 21. They had a nice run until a point about mid-season with Jacoby Brissett where it started to fall apart, and obviously didn't get much better late 22 with Watson. We know what last year was. And I think that we're making the obvious case that there are some things Kevin can't control, but you can't be one of the worst offenses in the NFL for 2 years. You just can't. And there was a nice run with Flacco late last year where they put some things together, but they still turned it over a lot. And ultimately the turnovers are what did in a pretty talented team last year, late in the year, and especially in the playoff game. So I think that the thing the Browns have to be evaluating is, as we've now watched Kevin pass off play calling, is what is he going to bring to the table? Because it's obvious now that he is at best, and this is not a bad thing necessarily, a average to above average play caller that doesn't come without warts, right? Like I think that that's being fair. Is there are some issues with what he's done, the production he's had. He's also done well at times. So if you're saying he's done really poorly and he's had some good runs, he's average. So is he a huge net positive as a CEO? Maybe that's what they wanted to evaluate, Andrew, is if we take the offense away from him and we try to find that solution, maybe Ken is that guy, maybe he isn't. But if we do that, is he going to bring a massive amount of value as a CEO of an organization? Because if he's not, then we got to look somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's, I think, a little bit of, again, we're doing the thing where we're trying to figure out why they did what they did last week. But if we're saying Kevin by sample size here is not, and this was the big part of the draw to him, especially after 2020, was like, look at this offense, look where this is going. This is going to be great. He's going to come up with stuff, innovative things all the time. I'm a huge Kevin supporter. I have been that way. I know that you have been with me at times on that, not to maybe the extent I have been, but that's okay. I think that what I'm saying is you can't evaluate this without recognizing some faults that Kevin has. And I think that he has done some things offensively, some quality things he's done, some baseline things he's brought up over the years.
Absolutely.
But is he the elite forward thinking play caller we thought maybe he was when he was at his apex of this is going to be great? It's not come to fruition. So then, like I said, it comes to what the Browns feel like they're getting from him as a non-offensive only thinker. And that's, Andrew, the part of the evaluation process that maybe that's what's going on the next 10 weeks after, or whatever, 7, 6, 8, I don't know. It's a blur. Weeks after the
listen,
bye.
Jake, I said after the game on Twitter, the way that felt to be beaten comprehensively in all three phases at home again, I wouldn't rule out somebody getting fired tomorrow. And I'm not saying the head coach, and I'm not saying that it happens, but would I be shocked if they decided to move on from a key piece of the coaching staff tomorrow in a way that, I mean, they already took play calling away from him, or it changed or whatever. I mean, it's obvious that they have an appetite for further change this season. And so, is there another key responsibility that they can change? What can change? I don't know, but
Yeah.
it just for them to be where they are and not. I mean, we haven't really talked about the defense yet. The special teams were poor today. You're looking for things that you can really hang your hat on in a lost season. And when you have performances like this, again, at home with, by the way, a very loud and raucous crowd. This was not, to start, a dead atmosphere where everybody was expecting this to go poorly and was ready to boo. They came ready to keep the good vibes going from last week. They were ready for this to be a tight battle and support the team. And the Chargers were having trouble hearing early. They were on the silent count all game. Like, there's a home field advantage there, and the Browns were flat. So, like you said, that speaks to the CEO piece, and I think that there are reasons that it would not be surprising. It wouldn't be an overreaction if somebody's job, was in jeopardy even now. But to your point about the rest of the season, I think where my mind goes is to that point. What are the things that they're good at? We know that the defense can play well. The defense can also play these single plays that are just appalling and inexcusable for a team that has one of the more experienced defensive coordinators in the league and a bunch of veteran players. The only way you can say it is that it can't happen, Jake. And so when you're seeing that stuff happen continually, we're into midseason. They're about to get a bye week. I think you mentioned this somewhere today. This is their effort going into the bye. You leave it all on the table going into the bye week. This was their effort. That's what I'm looking for, is what can you hang your hat on, and what's the argument comprehensively that you can come back and say, this is why this is the right group of guys to lead this team forward.
I don't have an answer. I really don't. I think we're in the middle of 2-7, and 2-7 brings constant questions about where is this falling apart. I think the indication I have above everything else with Kevin's decision to pass this off to Ken is that there's a very large evaluation process going on from every angle. Today didn't help anybody in the coaching staff. I mean, I can't think of one position group that got better in front of our eyes today. I mean, the busted coverage stuff, the first cover two where you don't carry number one. If number two goes vertical and number one runs vertical, you're not carrying him up the sideline is baffling to me. The play call of cover two, given that situation on the far hash against 3-by-1, also extremely baffling to me. Denzel misses another, looks like cover three to me for a touchdown. Like, they had 4 3rd and 6+ situations that led to 22 plus yard gains in the first half alone. And like, that's, again, I think 3 of those were at the I'm pointing the finger at Denzel, who I love. Now I need to see what they say about those coverages specifically. The first one, I don't know how anyone on God's green earth can expect Juan Thornhill to play deep half with with a vertical and in moving number two. Now maybe they're coaching that differently. I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know, but that is ugly. I don't know how on earth the second one, Denzel looks like he's the only corner playing down. There's a middle safety. I'm like baffled by that. He gives up another long one where he's bailing like 20. He's at 10 yards and bailing to 15 on the throw. I don't know, Andrew. I just know that that's what's hurting too, because defensively, most of the guys were fine today. Miles played a heck of a first half.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's just like 3 or 4 plays, 3 of which come from Denzel, where it's like, he's the guy. He's supposed to be one of your guys that you can lean on all the time. And that part of it it's soul sucking, because the offense was bad. And again, I totally understand that we've said this so many times, looking at the pie chart of blame this year, they're in the forefront. Mm-hmm. But there's these times where the defense is just not mentally strong enough to be able to be in a game like that and do their part. It's happened like 4 times this year, where the first half they've been a part of the problem to put themselves in this colossal hole. And you can't really get that mad at the defense because they're doing this, that, or the other. You can lean into 14 different things there, but like, they've played a part in at least 4 games where they have broken things in a bad way that have put themselves behind. And I'm watching other teams win some 10-9s, some ugly games, and the Browns couldn't do any of that this year. And we had spoken about it all year. The way that we needed to lean into this again and again and again was that the defense had to carry this team while the offense tried to figure out who they were. Now, the offense has been way worse than we imagined, but the defense has also been worse than we imagined.
Absolutely.
And it did slightly, as you do a bunch of optimism stuff in the preseason, you do have that pod we do where it's like, hey, if these 2 things go south, they're going to be bad.
Yeah.
And that is playing out right in front of us, that they're going to be that bad. And I mean, like, the punt return stuff, the special teams is inexcusable.
Really
and
hard
then,
to pick.
the kick from Hopkins at the end was like JV football stuff there, divoting his foot in the ground. Like, it was just like one of those many moments we've had where we've seen them in that stadium look like they could play the clown music behind it. It was that kind of day. And tough stuff, Andrew. Really tough.
And so I guess the way that I would say it, Jake, going forward, right? They're 2-7. They've got 8 more games, and they play 4 more games against their division. They've got 2 games against the Steelers. They play meaningful football games down the stretch, even if it isn't about where the Browns can go playoffs wise. It's not as if the season is over from the standpoint of them needing to be competitive. It's the conversation that we've had over the course of the season. They need to continue to compete. They need to look to win football games, and they need to prove, as we've been talking about, that there are things that they can do well. And I think, like you said, the way that I would posit the back half of this season now with the bye week upon us is that it is a longer term evaluation of what this team can be. The players, the coaches, and in the reflection of how you evaluate the players, you're also, in my mind, evaluating the front office and the roster that they've put together. And I think that it's hard in these situations, Jake, to not end up mired in negativity, right? Because you want to be critical. The team is not good enough considering what they're spending on it. I mean, it's just, they're not value for money here. So you start to ask questions of who's at fault, and that is a negative conversation. You're looking for somebody to blame. You can have a bigger philosophical question about maybe the season, has just kind of been doomed because of the way that it started, and that's, whatever. But I guess what I'm saying is, if we can look at some key metrics to evaluate from here on out, I think one of the things that we can talk about over the bye are what are the things we're trying to see the Browns improve upon? What are the things still within their control as they probably bounce around from quarterback to quarterback and see where this thing goes? Those are the points where I think we have to put our attention, because it just does not pay to we aren't going to get the answers on who we want to blame and how that all goes down until the end of the season, if then, right? Because you just don't get that post-mortem mid-season. So I brought it up. I'm not saying I don't want to talk about it. Obviously, there's a lot to talk about in terms of what's gone wrong. But I also think then what I'm just sort of within my own brain thinking about what the next framework looks like. And you go back to what things looked like in previous seasons that were lost when the Browns were, had that bad year in 2019 after we thought they were going to be good. It was a question of, they'll probably fire the coach. Which ones of these guys come back? And I don't know that they'll probably fire the coach this time, but it's the same question of which players are going to stick around and what parts of the organization overall can you really plant a flag in?
There's a lot of good points you bring up there, Andrew. I mean, it's been a minute since we've been in this situation. And to be honest, we haven't, since I've been doing this, I haven't covered this scenario. I was loosely covering the team in 2017 when it was 0-16. And the whole time we were doing that, it was like all about discussing the quarterbacks because we knew what pick they were going to have. And there was this clear, strong quarterback class. And that was a lot of the conversation. And it was just kind of like having fun, almost having goofy fun picking apart that offense. And could Deshaun Kaiser actually be an answer? Let's watch his play. And there were these fun young pieces like David Njoku, and they weren't good enough to win. You were hoping they would find a way to win one or two. But like 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23 have all included. Now, some of those 18 and 19 were disappointing. They didn't quite get far enough, but they were at least like hovering until late November before they were eliminated in those seasons. This is different. This is 2-7 at the turn of November. So you kind of add all of that into whether there are big changes looming, and those big changes are different than firing Freddie Kitchens after one season. Those are changing a 4-year head coach, right? Andrew's in his 5th year here. If my math checks out, like he is, they've been here a while.
Mm-hmm.
And from that is like, what are we paying attention to that matters? Like, there aren't even, some of these guys are younger into their second contracts, Delpit and JOK and some of these. And then there's veterans that you just know won't be here. Shelby Harris, Dalvin Tomlinson's probably gone. There are some of those. So like you're watching Mike Hall. Does he keep getting better? Does Cedric Tillman keep getting better? What are you doing with Miles and Denzel, who are like your young enough core that you want to keep them around, but you don't want to get them hurt. You don't want something stupid to happen to one of those guys that cost them the first portion of next year. There's like a lot of really, going into the bye, there's just a lot of like, how do I look at this team to evaluate what I care about the back half? I certainly don't want Cedric Tillman playing with any other quarterback than Jameis because he kind of gives him a chance to get better. Like, I think Dorian is maybe if it continues to be really bad for Jameis, like maybe you consider, should we give Dorian 3 or 4 games to close the year to give him a chance?
Right.
But those are just like, the odds of him coming out of a dead season 4-game start session of proving he's the guy is almost unfair to him. So I don't know, Andrew. This is where we have to think about, because our minds haven't been here. Even in the midst of 2-6, when we got to this point, we still were thinking, even in this game, like, what? Okay, how do they figure this out? Now we got to start thinking about how do we make this enjoyable for the rest of us the rest of the year, but like, where are we looking that matters? Like, what are the 5 pieces of this team that we care about going into the uncertainty of the next 7 or 8 weeks that loom, where we don't know if the coaches are going to be here. We don't know who the decision maker could be in the front office. This is a tough stretch. It's a tough stretch. So I don't have a great answer for that. It's uncharted territory.
Right.
And that's kind of what's wild.
Yeah, that's the way to say it. I think that's what I mean is I'm not sitting here in this postgame offering suggestions really even of what to watch, but I think that's where our minds have to go, right? Is that we have to, like, this season has been so frustrating. I have been living in the paradigm of who can I be mad at for how bad this has been. And I guess what I'm saying is I can't live that way for the rest of the season. It would be a waste of everybody's time if I was just lashing out every week. So the question then becomes, what are you looking for? What are the things, independent of the result of the game, what are the things that you're looking for to see? And I think you're right to talk about some of the young players, but I also think there's got to be some improvements, right? I think some of the stuff that we have continue to yet to see the defense do consistently well. Now, hey, worth shouting out a positive. They stopped jet sweeps in this game, Jake. So
love that. It's good to see. At the sacrifice of some zone coverage, maybe. I don't know. I'm just kidding.
Right.
It didn't have anything to do with it, but yeah, no, that was. We're gonna have to silver lining the heck out of this thing for players, and for coaches. Like, is Schwartz the long-term defensive coordinator here? I don't know. There's so much mystery, but like, what we want to see is. You can quit. The guys could quit the back half of the year. It's very doable. A lot of them could pack it in. A lot of them maybe that don't feel like their contract's going to get picked up or something like that. So it's just seeing who wants to be here, who's going to play hard, and if anybody develops. I think they have enough veterans that won't. I'm saying this after a 27-10 stinkfest, but I do think they have enough veterans that won't let them pack it in that far. Like, are still going to go out there and try to win. The Rodney McLeod types, the Shelby Harris types, those guys that have been here and been around the NFL long enough to know better is the way I would say it. So I think they're going to compete, and they're probably going to win 2 or 3 more games, maybe a couple more. But I don't expect that. But I am kind of interested if, like, this is a scenario where if you're a younger guy, you have a chance to sort of make your voice a part of this and make your play speak for that, and like become a young member of the team that figures it out. Because if I remember correctly, early Dan Campbell years, they put it together in the back half of a season. I could be
That's
wrong about that,
no, that's
but I think
exactly right.
they put it together and won some games late in the year. Now, this team might not make the playoffs, right? Like, it's pretty clear they're not, but you can springboard yourself into the next year a little bit if you win
Yes.
some of these games at the end of the year. And I'm still not in tank mode, right?
No.
I'm still not in that mode where I'm like, I'm okay with them lose. There are going to be people that cover the Browns or that talk about them on social that are like, they should be losing every game the rest of the way. That's fine. Whatever, do what you want there. But I am of the belief that this place cannot dive back into that habitual stance of let's just throw away the meaningfulness of outcomes.
Well,
And
here's
I'd
what
like
I'd
to
say.
see them fight.
Yeah, I think that's well said, Jake. And what I would add to that is you got to choose, because if they're going to go 2-15 or 3-14, then everybody gets fired.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want a top 5 pick, but you're hiring all the positions, or do you want them to try and figure this thing out and bring some of the front office or coaching staff or both back, right? Like, you can't have both of those things in my mind. This organization, the front office, the general manager and the head coach have not, in my mind, earned enough trust that you can let them lose out in an effort to improve your draft standing and then bring them back next year. I just don't see how that's a winning combination. So then the question is, would you rather see them lose out, clean house, and have that top draft pick, or would you rather see them figure some things out, as you said, and roll into next year with some better sense of who they are and who they want to be in this presumably post Deshaun Watson world, and then bring those people back to make that transition as part of the team that's already been here?
I'm of the belief I'd like to see as many players play well as possible the rest of the year. And if that means you keep the coach and you keep, because you see some stuff there, that's fine. I mean, but the way, I'll say it this way, coming out of the bye where there'll be a lot of self-reflection and a lot of what are we doing as a team? How are we feeling? Like how they respond out of the bye and then through the rest of the year, we'll probably tell Kevin's story. If he can get his guys to play hard the rest of the year, he probably has a chance to stick around. That's how it is. You get your guys to play hard, win some games you're not supposed to win. Kevin's back. If they totally fold
those opportunities too.
Yeah. If they fold the tent and say, we're done and we're going, like you said, Andrew, 4-13, then the writing's probably on the wall. So that's a simplified way of looking at this, but I also don't think it needs to be any more difficult than that. If they fold up the rest of the year and play non-competitive football games throughout the remainder of the schedule, there will be such bad energy from everything around it and probably within it that I don't see how you can just say, hey, we're going to run it back unless you clear house around Kevin or something.
Right.
And if you're doing that after he's cleared the defensive staff out once, offensive staff out once, it does get to the point where you're saying, who's a problem? Who's a problem?
Yeah.
So the best outcome, in my opinion, is that they win 4 or 5 games, stay competitive in all of them. And I mean, 4 or 5 of the remaining.
Overall. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And go 500 over the second half of the year. 8 games, go 4-4. Find a way to go 4-4.
And they play really hard and they look like they give a shit and they're out there trying all game. And that's where I say, yeah, this is a better second half of the year. I can see where there's a bunch of positivity and you maybe go after a name in the draft and move up a little bit, get a little aggressive, something like that to really get everybody back into this. So the performance of the second half of the year is going to decide pretty much every coach that isn't, sitting warm and cozy at 6-2 or, something crazy, some really nice records. So I do think that there is a very tough microscope happening that at this point, though, is fair. Given the results of this first half of the year, you would be remiss to not look at it that way. So, that's where I stand on it, Andrew. I do genuinely believe. I don't think there's anybody in this organization, as much as people have wanted to tell you this, that, his job is safe. Okay, where are you getting that from? Because they had one good week against a depleted Ravens defense? That's it? Like that? That's not the world that this should be, especially given the drastic change that happened to the way your offense is approaching organization by changing play callers. So I think everyone's coaching for their life, and that's where I'm at with it right now. And everyone, and obviously the results of player development are helping determine whether Andrew Berry is a viable leader in player acquisition and player development. So
Yeah,
that's where I'm at, man. They
no,
can do with it what they want.
I think that's really well put together in terms of that. This is they still have a chance to. We started the show talking about the hype, right, that we experienced after they upset the Ravens, how well Jameis played, how good the offense looked overall. There was hype there, and I think some of it was overblown, as we talked about. On the other hand, we know the level of talent of this football team. There are difference making players. Obviously, they missed JOK today. The linebacker situation is rough at the moment, right? That puts them in some difficult positions. We know Denzel Ward is fighting through some concussion issues, and who knows if that has something to do with his. My point is there is adversity, but also there are players here that can really play, and if that collection of talent goes out and struggles to win one or two more games, I think it tells a really compelling story about the state of things going forward.
Right.
And vice versa. If they can go out and be competitive in these games and not get blown out a bunch of times and stay in them, and then, like you said, win a few you're not supposed to, beat a few divisional teams, try and get to 3-3 in the division or something like that, then you can make a pretty strong argument that this was a hiccup and you got to fix the quarterback situation, and then you bring it all back next year, and we'll see where we go. So I think that kind of helps us shape what this looks like for the 8 weeks after the bye. Like we said, there's going to be specific stuff to watch, right? In terms of how some young players play, in terms of how this offense continues to try and work, I guess, just find what works to a certain extent. So we'll be watching all of that. And I think, the bye week is always internally, they always sell it as a chance to kind of reevaluate things and dig in on what has gone wrong. And Jake, there's plenty to review for them because, as you said, nobody would have hesitated to take a bet if you said they'd be 2-7 at the bye week. Everybody would have taken your money. They would have offered you good odds, and you'd have a bunch of extra cash right now. So this is as unexpected as it is disappointing and frustrating. And so the bye week for the team, I'm sure, will be fruitful in terms of itemizing all the stuff that hasn't gone well. From a coverage perspective, we're going to break this loss down the way that we do every game. So that'll get our full attention through the midweek time. And then we'll start to look at kind of what the second half of the season looks like and how our coverage changes a little bit to include the draft and the other areas that we have to focus on. The other thing, I just want to mention as we close here, Jake, is the trade deadline, because you mentioned it earlier. Absolutely ridiculous that Mike Florio thinks it's appropriate to publish a trade rumor in the middle of a football game. I don't understand that at all from a journalism I don't know why I pronounced it that way. From a journalism standpoint, I don't understand it at all. I also don't understand, does that benefit the agent? Does that benefit the Lions? Why is that out there in the middle of a football game? Doesn't make any sense to me. He's playing. It's not like he's inactive. He's on the field, and I'm looking at a tweet about him. It doesn't make I've never seen that. I don't believe I've ever seen that. So Zadarius Smith seems like he knows he's going to get traded. I mean, he barely talked to the media. Players in the locker room talking about him seem to be conceding that he's going to get traded. We will see who else gets traded. I think we'll have something up on the website at brownsfilmbreakdown.com that kind of, tries to talk about who's available, who might get traded, what the compensation might look like, a little bit of a primer for you as we've got about 48 hours, a little bit less than that now until the trade deadline. But I guess, Jake, I would just ask for your opinion. We talked already. We don't want to see them lose out or put a poor performance on tape in the second half of the season. What are your thoughts about maybe a player or two that you would be okay if they traded? And are there, are there bright lines that you're drawing around certain players?
Yeah, most of the veteran types I'd be seeing if anyone's interested. Does somebody need, Shelby Harris's services the rest of the year for a cheap swap? Does somebody need any of these guys? I mean, Jordan Hicks, when he comes back, keep playing Diabate with JOK, they have a bunch of those veterans that you use to pursue end of the year, like a year where you're pushing all in. So even Tomlinson, there's an option, in my opinion, to try to move him. Like any of these guys for teams that want to have an opportunity to go somewhere else because they're going to help another team, or they're going to get you something in return, even if it's not for the 25 draft and it's for the 26 draft, I'd be fine with it, Andrew. I mean, Jack Conklin of service to somebody else out there. If you're talking who of the younger crowd, is Greg Newsome going to get you any return? I would be interested in that. I'm not, if they're young, talented, super talented part of the core, Newsome is not in that group to me. It's Delpit, it's JOK, it's, you're talking Miles in terms of guys that out there that would have interest in other side players, right? Like, I'm not trading David. I'm not trading some of those pieces, but I'm leaning into veteran types. And if there's a young fringe player, like, again, Newsome is one, does somebody want to take a lot of offensive lines are beat up across the league. Does Jedrick Wills of interest to somebody who wants to try to rebuild, reshape him quickly, can give you something? You never know. So I'm having those conversations if somebody's interested in those pieces middle of the season. But I think it's pretty clear. If you're asking yourself, like, is this guy's pretty good and pretty young? I wouldn't move those guys, because I do think there's a piece of rebuilding on the fly that can happen here, because you do have enough talent at the top end of your young group. So I don't think you need to go crazy. Now, I mean, again, there could be great Godfather offers out there for somebody that I think the Browns will listen to anything, but the act, I think, is where you draw a pretty clear line. And I just don't know that you're going to get some of that you think you're going to get in return middle of a season. I mean, think about to yourself, how many first round picks have you ever seen traded in season? It's so rare, guys. So, like, teams are looking to add supplemental pieces that they couldn't maybe find elsewhere in free agency. And that's where Za'Darius, Dalvin, Jordan Hicks, even Juan Thornhill, if somebody they want to take a stab on a safety like that. I mean, most people would think you can't trade him for anything, right? But I mean, I'm just saying, like, I'm listening to any of those for people that want, because I'd like to see more of Mike Hall. I'd like to see more of Ronnie Hickman. I'd like to see a little bit more of Diabate. I'd like to see a little bit more, maybe instead of Elijah Moore, you're saying, can we move him for something cheap and get Thrash back out of playing more?
Exactly.
I just think that I would be listening to those and be engaged in those kind of conversations. But I think in a world where you're like, trade Miles for 2 first-round picks, or trade Denzel for a first or a second, those things just don't happen in the NFL. So I would temper your expectations on those. Are off-season things that happen, but not regular season things that happen.
Yeah, and then there's a question about if any of those bigger trades happen, ownership gets involved, and there's a question about, do you want these guys making a trade for multiple first-round picks if they're not going to be here to make them? Is that in the best interest of the franchise?
Right.
Do you want to handicap this year's team that badly by trading one of your best players? I agree. That's all more speculative. I think it's probably another situation where there's a lot more smoke about it than what gets done. It seems obvious that Za'Darius is, like I said, 1 foot out the door. But beyond that, I think you probably see them stand pat with the understanding that they would like to be competitive in football games and win some, even if it doesn't behoove them much in their draft position. But listen, all the talent on the team hasn't held them back so far. So, who knows where this is headed over the next 8-9 weeks. As I said, we'll have all the coverage of the Chargers game and everything that went on throughout the week. Jake is already digging into the film, I'm sure, looking at some of the defensive breakdown stuff. There will be film rooms on that. I know we'll get John Stephenson involved on that because he can speak so well to the defensive side of things and just what the hell they were thinking there. And obviously, we'll break down Jameis Winston's play. Were their guys open? What was missing? How does that all look? So all of that's to come this week. We'll have a week full of podcasts. We'll have a week full of writing. Like I mentioned, the trade deadline is still to come, and plenty of other analysis about things, about the Browns. And then we'll take some bigger looks at things through the end of the week, into the weekend, probably talk some draft, and then come back next week with some bigger picture pieces about what this Brown season has been through 9 weeks. So we appreciate you all joining us. My thanks to Jake Burns for being with me. Thank you so much to everybody for tuning in. Like I said, check out brownsfilmbreakdown.com if you haven't already. Please join us there. Best Browns community on the internet is what I would call it. So until next time, be well, everybody, and go Browns.